So now we welcome in on the Heister Automotive Group hotline, Margaret Fleming from Front Office Sports, one of the reporters kind of leading the charge in covering this situation. Margaret, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time. I guess we'll start with this. Like, will we ever get the truth, or are we always going to have these like three sides to the story for what happened with the quarterback of UNLV?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. I don't know if we'll ever really get the truth, but yeah, a lot of sides saying different things. But it's an interesting case what's going on over here. They're kind of saying on his side that it was a verbal agreement. We thought it was going to be $100,000. It's been $3,000, and now that was pulled out. From the other side, UNLV and the collective are saying, we never agreed to anything crazy like that, and are saying that they're kind of lifting threats toward the university, and yeah, it's kind of crazy what's going on. And then you see his teammate coming out and saying he's going to redshirt as well. He clarified that was not because of NIL, but definitely interesting timing. So it's a curious case what's going on out there in Las Vegas.
What are the next possible steps? Like, could he sue for the money? Is the team going to enact the courts because they want? I assume. In the world of NIL recruiting, you very much don't want to be the team known for not making good on your promises for $100,000. Like, where does this go from here?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be the team that's known for that. I don't think that the school could really necessarily sue. I don't think that he could necessarily really sue because, again, this was a verbal agreement that they're saying was made by an assistant coach who is not a representative for a collective, and they didn't put pen to paper because that would be recruiting violations of some kind. So, yeah, so it's a really weird collective world. But yeah, it doesn't seem like really that they could sue him because he's allowed to redshirt just like any other student's allowed to redshirt for whatever reason they decide to. And on the flip side, it's not like he again put pen to paper that he could say, you all said that you owed me this. Necessarily. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think we'll see legal action out of this, but it definitely sets a weird precedent and brings up a lot of conversations about like NIL agents and what those mean and look like. Who's protecting these students? Who's making these deals for these students? Yeah, it's really interesting.
That was going to be my next question. We're talking with Margaret Fleming of Front Office Sports. There is an agent involved, and there's agents that have been quoted in some of these stories, and like, where was the agent when this agreement took place? Like, it seems like if a player is going, I'm not getting my money, their first call is to the agent, and the agent goes and gets their money. Like, does this agent just not doing their job?
I've definitely seen some discourse about that, about like, is the agent really the one at fault here? Yeah, it's interesting to think that I've seen some things about how the agent like wasn't licensed in Nevada. I've seen things about how the agent, should they have come to the school sooner about this, because this agreement allegedly happened in February, but he didn't bring it up until recently. Should that have happened before? There's also just like, what even is an NIL agent? And that's a job for a lot of people in college sports now, but there aren't really regulations as to like how you get qualified for that. Like nationwide, there isn't really like a set of rules or, a course that you go through. Like an agent in professional sports has a lot more going on there than it does in college. And so a lot of these students don't really exactly know what they're signing up for sometimes when they get an agent. So yeah, I don't want to say too many mean things about this person that I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely a curious case here about like, why did the agent not provide more protection, you would think, for the student earlier on?
It's also just kind of ironically or by happenstance, all of this is going on at the same time UNLV is entertaining or was entertaining the Pac-12 as a potential move. Recently, and again, you can correct me if I get any of these details wrong, they recommitted to the Mountain West because of a large financial commitment from the conference to the team. Has anybody pointed out the ridiculous irony that UNLV basically went to their larger institution and said, we're leaving unless you give us more money, while admonishing the player for, in their like allegations on their side of things, doing exactly that and saying, I'm leaving unless you give me more money?
It's all really interesting, the timing of all of this. All of it is just crazy that it's happening at the same time for UNLV. I think when you think about college quarterbacks in a power conference, and again, that's the whole reason that the Pac-12 is trying to poach Mountain West schools, is because it's trying to get back to power conference, status again. If you're a quarterback in one of those schools, you're likely, going to make from your NIL collective right now anywhere from like $500,000 to a couple $1 million. Is sort of the reported numbers. And so if he was asking for 100,000, that would still be below power conference levels. And then then UNLV was still not really biting on that. And so they're definitely not really acting. And if you just look at this one example, the school's not really, or the collective particularly, is not really acting like a Power 5 school or collective. So I guess I understand from the financial side that they want to stay a little bit smaller if this is how they're acting with their quarterback.
I just want to press on that a little bit more. 500,000 to a couple million. Is that the market? Like, one of the things I found very, very difficult is to get anybody to say a number. A lot of coaches will say, recruits are now they're worried about NIL. They're just going to the highest bidder, or, we wanted this guy, but the money that so-and-so offered him is 4 times what we could. And I'm going, I can't get that number honed in. Is 500,000 to a couple million, is that a number that we can kind of lock in on?
That's a number that's been out there from like a couple different sources or outlets or whatnot. And I think that that's sort of for more power conference quarterbacks, but it varies by position and also varies by sport. I mean, if you think about like men's basketball, like a Power 5, I guess it's Power 4 now, point guard is maybe somewhere around like 300,000, something like that, which is a lot less than, $2 million. So it kind of depends. I mean, we saw a softball player at Texas Tech just got $1 million. So there's kind of numbers that are out there roughly. But yeah, that's the whole point about this industry, is that it's so under the radar that people really don't know what the numbers are. And it's very covered up.
Margaret Fleming, Front Office Sports, is the voice you are hearing. You can follow her on Twitter at MGFleming12. Is this just the new normal for college football? We've heard for decades and decades college coaches lie during recruiting. Normally it's, you're going to start, or like, we're going to have a role for you on offense. One of my favorite is, we're going to let you play quarterback, and then by the second week of training camp, they're lined up as a safety or a tight end or something else. But we've never seen those lies turn into, I'm not going to play for you. If it now looks like if you lie about how much money they're going to get, the players are willing to stand on that and kind of protect their eligibility. Is this something we should get used to?
I think it's a really good question. I think that players definitely right now in the market are being told, from either the collectives or from the coaches or whatnot, numbers at every school. And I think that if schools don't deliver on that, I think this definitely could be a trend. I think that what happened at UNLV, maybe it's a kind of peculiar case because the coach and the collective weren't really aligned on what they were thinking or offering. But yeah, if schools continue to do that, I think it's totally within the athlete's right to say, this school said that they could pay me this much, and this school said that they could pay me this much. I came here because for so many reasons, but this was part of it. And, if you fall through on that, I think it's within the right of the student to say that they don't want to be at that school and want to go somewhere else. But I think we'll kind of have to wait and see if UNLV was sort of a weird case where they weren't really aligned with each other, or if that's going to be more of a norm.
Do you have any idea how difficult or how easy it is for a player to kind of figure out what another team would be willing to spend? Because, here in the Triangle here, North Carolina State, at last year, their quarterback made a similar decision and wanted to preserve his eligibility and decided to transfer that offseason. That's a much easier decision to make if the next school has a bag, as they say, waiting for you. Is that easy to find out if you're a quarterback or if you are a premier position player and you want to make sure next year your bag is secured?
I would imagine, I am not a college football star, but I would imagine for those that are, it's something that comes up in your conversations. I mean, NIL used to be something that wasn't allowed to be talked about during recruiting, and then all rules around NIL went out the window with the Tennessee injunction earlier this year, and so that's allowed to be discussed just openly. So I guess through talking to different schools, you can know that. I know for the case at NC State, it was interesting because I don't think he was necessarily going for NIL dollars. I think he had kind of wanted to stay there, wanted to stay there, and then had kind of thought he was going to preserve his red shirt the entire season. But this kind of idea of like redshirting to maintain your eligibility, it's been around for a long time, but I think there's a lot more reasons to have a player pursue that now, between transferring somewhere else and immediately getting to make an impact the next season on the field, to going somewhere else that could give you more money. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why players could decide to redshirt. But then again, if you're redshirting, that means you're only playing a handful of games, so you're not really showing other schools what you're worth, or even showing your own school what you're worth. So there's pros and cons to it, but I definitely think there are a lot more reasons that players are doing it now than they used to before.
Last one before we let you go. You may not be a college football star, but I'm gonna, for the point of this question, make you like the czar, the president of college football. If you take over and you're looking at the chaos of this and you're reporting on it and you're hearing the 7 different stories about one event, is there a priority number one or a rule you would enact or change immediately to kind of get all of this under control?
Oh, wow. Another good question. I don't even know. Charlie Baker's got a full plate right now. I think his first priority right now needs to be figuring out House versus NCAA, that big case that's going on. That's having to do with revenue sharing. I think if they can figure out the revenue sharing bit, that will take a lot of pressure off of NIL, because, I mean, we don't know how this is all going to turn out, but like if college athletes start getting a portion of media rights just straight from revenue sharing instead of these kind of unknown NIL salaries, kind of, which is what they've turned into, that is a lot more out in the open. That could be regulated a little bit more than these independent collectives. If it's like a certain amount, just like how schools get a certain amount of distributions for their media rights, if players get that too. Again, that is a whole other mess, because how does that work with Title IX? How does that work with, smaller sports versus, the ones that get more viewership? I don't really know how that all works, but I think that that's probably the number one main thing that they need to figure out right now.
That's Margaret Fleming of Front Office Sports joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. Margaret, thank you for the time.
Thank you so much for having me.